Hello, young scholars. Okay, so I feel like we're tearing through the book and not quite going into the depth I would like to. So this is the plan. I don't know if this will all be ready. It's taken longer to prep than expected, but that's the nature of things now. Um, so I'm going to slow down the reading, jumping to number 4. We're going to get to page 117 for Friday. Um, and one of the reasons for that is, well, if you're lagging behind, I don't know if you have a ton of time or if you're scrambling. Somehow I have no time during the day. But um, we're not going to go over page 117 is halfway through chapter 5. Chapter 5 is enormous. So today what I'm going to do is a little lesson on style. And I'm going to use parts of chapter 3 and go into chapter 4. If I have time to make it, I'm going to do a chapter review of chapter 4 overall in terms of plot and character and all that. Again, I want to try something new. I want to try to work with these breakout rooms. You may have used them with other teachers. I have not figured them out yet, but you can apparently only do it during with kids online. So I'm actually going to put a Canvas discussion up where I want you to just post questions that I may not have addressed, things that are confusing you about characters, plot, themes, or just general questions about what's going on in the novel. If you don't have a question, well, I'm going to leave it up until the end of our next class. So I'll give you time to come up with something, maybe after I go over some of this stuff. All right, so this one right now, I'm going to jump into what I want to talk about in terms of style. Don't worry if you're lost on all this. Okay, so I wanted to take an example where Vonnegut's style is really well illustrated, where it's really apparent uh, how he goes about writing in a way that's unique to him. Hopefully, you've noticed this is very different than, say, Faulkner. And I'd like to zoom in on some of those aspects of what makes him so. Okay, so I've obviously done some things with color and italics and underlines. This is from the end of chapter 3. And I'm not going to do the most thorough analysis probably, but I want to take a look at this. So first, we generally read, even though Billy's train wasn't moving, its boxcars were kept locked tight. Nobody was to get off until the final destination. To the guards who walked up and down outside, each car became a single organism, which ate, drank, and excreted through its ventilators. It talked, or sometimes yelled, through its ventilators too. In went water and loaves of black bread and sausage and cheese, and out came shit and piss and language. Okay, so you may have noticed I started to connect a couple of words via color, um, and I want to talk about language there for a second. Organism and excreted are two words you would use where? Yes, very good, Beatrice. They seem like scientific words you would use in a science class. One of them actually has almost a synonym, though, in this major shift from language. We get down to the bottom and we start using language you would not use in a science class. Shit and piss are very vulgar. And there's a shift intentionally here between this language and this language. And actually, this ending, shit and piss and language, even has a sort of contrast. I didn't make it the same red because it's not necessarily a scientific thing. But when you think about what's coming out, this is filthy, this is excrement, they're both excrement. And then language is this sort of high, um, higher order thing that comes out of humans. He doesn't make much of a distinction. These are the things we have to spew out that all animals and living organisms do. And then language is our, um, sort of what makes us so special. Anyway, backing up though, all of those things are not being done by Billy. We have a shift in perspective here. One of the things I've been talking about is perception, how things are seen. I talked about at the beginning of chapter 3. We get the German Shepherd princess's point of view on war. Here, Billy is barely even, he's not really here. He's in the background because to the guards who walked up and down outside, each car became a single organism which ate and drank and excreted through its ventilators. So I'm underlining the this is both the character, right? The car becomes an organism that does these things. It is the car. It talked or sometimes yelled through its ventilators too. What is this called? Where you take an inanimate object and give it lifelike qualities? Very good, Steve. Personification. All right. To an extreme here, where in went water. Now, I'm also highlighting nobody was to get off until the final thing. Even though Billy's train wasn't moving, its boxcars were kept locked tight. Syntactically, we're highlighting the exception here. This is still the subject. Its boxcars were kept locked tight, even though Billy's train wasn't moving, is one way you could have arranged that sentence. Nobody is the subject here. Was to get off is an interesting phrase for me because it seems like it's very passive. We don't have, the Germans aren't necessarily saying this is a rule. It's just this is the way things are. Nobody was to get off until the final destination. You don't have the authority of that rule stated here. All right, so then we have the shift of perspective. Again, this could be each car became a single organism which ate and drank and excreted through its ventilators to the guards who walked up and down outside. But putting this at the beginning shifts our perspective to that of the guards immediately. All right. You may have also noticed there is a real sort of redundancy in his sentences. I used that word and it confused somebody. I mean, it's repetitive for very little reason other than, in other words, grammatically, you don't need to write like this, especially down here. In went water and loaves of black bread and sausage and cheese, and out came shit and piss and language. Why so many ands? If you wrote like this, you would lose points, but unless you were writing fiction. Okay. Any idea? What is the effect of doing this by putting all these ands? Very good, Loretta. It creates a sort of rhythm and highlights how many things. It seems like more things than it would be if it were commas. In went water, loaves of black bread, sausage, cheese, and out came shit, piss, and language. Would not flow the same way. This creates a rhythm that is intentional, that highlights each of the things that is going in and coming out. All right. So what we're talking about is syntax, the order of things. All right. Also, the rhythm and the way rhythm is constructed. We're talking about language, which is like diction. It's a broader term for diction. It's the types of diction you choose from. So when you're writing science paper, you use organism, excreted. You might use other words he uses like human being. All right, and a shift in language down to here, obviously you could say poopy or crap or caca, but he goes with the harshest diction within the informal language bucket. If you think of language as sort of groups of diction, you're choosing something different up here than you are down here. And when I was talking about technology, this is also an example. It's tied to other themes. So why is this technology? Well, the boxcars, the train, the ability to handle masses of human beings and to take away their humanity, all right? The humans don't talk, it talked, meaning the car, the boxcar, is the main character here, all right? The machine that can find, the humans become the sort of guts of the machine. They're just doing what the organism needs to be done. Okay, so this dehumanizes our characters. There's no individual with any kind of agency. Nobody does what they want. You have the observers, and then there's no mention of Billy or any of our characters. They're just sort of the guts of this organism. Right, now this is also used to a different effect at the beginning of chapter 4. And I want to look at the end of chapter 3 and see how it connects. Now I'm focusing only on one aspect, which is the imagery in the novel, the recurring images. Okay, I put the green here for a particular reason. One is to sort of highlight that this idea of the trains being the characters, this mechanical thing, having more humanity than the soldiers, continues throughout. So during the night, some of the locomotives began to tootle to one another and then to move. It's almost like Thomas the Train and his friend. The locomotive at the last car of each train were marked with a striped banner of orange and black, indicating the train was not fair game for airplanes, that it was carrying prisoners of war. I think this is from the PDF. I think there should be a comma here. Okay, so again, the main character is the locomotive, but I want to highlight this image. Skipping forward toward the end of the chapter, these are the last paragraph of chapter 3. Now the train began to creep eastward. Somewhere in there was Christmas. Billy Pilgrim nestled like a spoon with a hobo on Christmas night. Okay, sorry, I had to pause there. And he fell. So now the train began to somewhere in there was Christmas. Billy Pilgrim nestled like a spoon with the hobo on Christmas night, and he fell asleep. And he traveled in time to 1967 again, to the night he was kidnapped by a flying saucer from Tralfamadore. Okay, so interestingly, Vonnegut's doing two things here. He's ending the chapter with like a cliffhanger, which should seem to create drama. However, it also removes the drama from the next scene because we know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to be kidnapped by a flying saucer from Tralfamadore. When you look back on chapter 3, one of the things you might notice is a lot of it is about the war. There's less of Billy in his midlife. We start chapter 4 with this, and what I've done is highlighted things that I want to talk about. And perhaps you'll notice what I'm going at before I get there. Billy Pilgrim could not sleep on his daughter's wedding night. This is from the PDF, and it's missing an apostrophe, children. He was 44. The wedding had taken place that afternoon in a gaily striped tent in Billy's backyard. The stripes were orange and black. Billy and his wife, Valencia, nestled like spoons in their big double bed. They were jiggled by magic fingers. Valencia didn't need to be jiggled to sleep. Valencia was snoring like a bandsaw. The poor woman didn't have ovaries or a uterus anymore. They had been removed by a surgeon, by one of Billy's partners in the new Holiday Inn. There was a full moon. Billy got out of bed in the moonlight. He felt spooky and luminous, felt as though he were trapped in cool fur that was full of static electricity. He looked down at his bare feet. They were ivory and blue. Billy now shuffled down his upstairs hallway, knowing that he was about to be kidnapped by a flying saucer. Let me pause here for a second. Did anybody notice why I've been highlighting these in red? Very good, Bernice. These are all images, especially these two we just saw in the last chapter, nestled like spoons. Billy was nestling with a hobo. The stripes are the same as what were on his on the POW train. All right, they were jiggled by magic fingers. That was part of your study guide questions, that Billy was jiggled to sleep. I highlighted this in green for something we'll talk about in greater depth later, but there's this idea about, this seems way off topic. It's information we don't need. Again, if you were writing like this in an essay, this would not belong in this paragraph and you would lose points for writing so poorly. But here it's done on purpose for an effect that we'll come back to. There was a full moon is just highlighting sort of his rhythm of a simple sentence as a paragraph, just by itself. Strangely, all of this stuff, which is irrelevant, is connected to them sleeping, but there was a full moon is separate, sort of breaks it into the next thing. You may not remember, but static electricity, this is something Billy started to see, what was it called? I don't know, a special sort of light that sailors used to see. It looked like static electricity. More frequently used, though, is blue and ivory, which describe the dead hobo, Billy's hands, dead things. All right, here they're describing his feet because it's nighttime. All right. Billy now shuffled down his upstairs hallway, knowing he was about to be kidnapped by a flying saucer. The hallway was zebra-striped with darkness and moonlight. The moonlight came into the hallway through doorways of the empty rooms of Billy's two children no more. They were gone forever. Billy was guided by dread and the lack of dread. Dread told him when to stop. Lack of it told him when to move again. He stopped. There's that rhythmic syntax again. Also, Billy not actually making choices on his own again. This is Billy being guided by dread and lack of dread. It's not Billy even having agency at night walking through his house. He went into his daughter's room. Her drawers were dumped. Her closet was empty, heaped in the middle of the room were all the possessions she could not take on a honeymoon.